So a few weeks ago, I made a video on the LA Clippers and how they seemed like they were finally starting to figure things out and put up great performances on a more consistent basis. Well, this Clippers team's great level of play hasn't seemed to decrease ever since I made that last video, as they've now won 13 of their last 15 games. And today, I want to talk about why this team has what it takes to make a deep playoff run and what they'll need to do in order to do just that. What's up, guys? SCJ here, and if you enjoyed today's video, then make sure to give it a like as it helps out a lot. And if you're new to the channel and or enjoy the NBA, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. So last night, the Clippers got themselves a nice 100-98 victory over the Detroit Pistons. And while that might not seem like too nice of a victory, as the Pistons are currently the third worst team in the entire NBA record-wise in front of the Timberwolves and the Rockets, the Clippers were playing the second half of the back-to-back and didn't have four of their typical starters, as PG-13, Kawhi Leonard, Serge Ibaka, and Patrick Beverly all didn't play in last night's game. So getting a win on the second half of a back-to-back without four of your starters is something that you got to give them credit for, at least to me, even if that was against the Detroit Pistons. The Clippers got great play from Luke Kennard, Ivica Zubac, and most specifically, Point Guard Reggie Jackson, as he scored 29 points on 50% shooting overall from the field, as well as grabbing 6 rebounds and dishing out an assist and hitting the game-winning shot in last night's game. The rest of the Clippers roster came together and scored just enough or played just well enough to get them the victory, and their newest signing, DeMarcus Cousins, had a very nice performance in just 15 minutes of play last night in Detroit off the bench. Now, following last night's victory, it hasn't just been 13 of the last 15 games that the Clippers have now won, but they've now also won 7 games in a row, and they've gotten some nice victories in the process as they blew out the Lakers, which, even though I do know the Lakers are hurt, I think a blowout win is always a positive. Then they got a nice 16-point victory over the tough Trailblazers following that one, and then in the game after that, they got a very nice victory yet again as they beat the extremely hot Phoenix Suns, who also currently hold the second best record in the entire NBA this season. So getting multiple double-digit victories over some of the league's top teams or some of the league's current top hot teams really shows that this Clippers team has played well. And if you look here, you can see that during this stretch where they've won 13 of their last 15 games, their two best players, Kawhi and Paul George, have missed 4 games each during that span. Their starting point guard, Patrick Beverly, has missed 13 of those 15 games, and one of their big offseason pickups, Serge Ibaka, has missed all 15 of those games. And I think that personally shows just how impressive this recent run has been for this Clippers team. Now, Paul George didn't play in last night's game, like I mentioned earlier, but he did play in the team's prior 4 games, and he put up really good numbers, scoring 32 points or more in every game, and really shooting the lights out, as he's averaged 55% shooting from the field, 60% shooting from 3, and 100% shooting from the free throw strike over that stretch. One crazy stat to truly show how locked in PG has been is the fact that in the Clippers' nice win over the Phoenix Suns that I mentioned before, the Suns only made 6 3-pointers, while Paul George all by himself made 7 threes. So he made more threes all on his own than the Suns' 12 men that played in that game did combined, which not only shows how well PG has played, but also how well the Clippers have defended lately, as the Suns shot just 6 for 24 from beyond the arc in that game, coming in at 25%, which is honestly very impressive to see, and something that should always get you the victory in a game when you defend that well. In terms of Paul George specifically, though, he's played better and averaged better numbers than he did last season, which is exactly what the Clippers are going to need from him come playoff time. But offense hasn't necessarily been the issue for the Clippers this season, as so far this year, they've averaged the 5th most points per game on the 4th best field goal percentage and the best 3-point percentage, which is impressive. And they've made NBA history in that regard now, as you can see here, as they are the best 3-point shooting volume team in NBA history. Now, their 3-point percentage has dropped down to 41.8% since this stat was posted, but that still puts them ahead of the 2015-16 Warriors by 0.2%. So that stat still stands. Now, I think this is a big deal with how important 3-point shooting has become in today's NBA, and I don't know if they'll finish this season with that best volume percentage ever, but nevertheless, that's still a very impressive thing to see, and they're still going to go down as one of the best teams ever in that regard, which of course is very impressive to see from them. Now, overall on the season, the Clippers have struggled a bit in causing their opponents to shoot a low field goal percentage, but they have held them to the 9th lowest 3-point percentage overall on the year. Over this stretch, however, they have looked even more impressive than they already were defensively, holding their opponents to the 8th lowest field goal percentage and the 6th worst three-point percentage, which is a positive for the Clippers as of late. They've also done great in preventing their opponents from scoring, as they've held them to 104.4 points per game over their last 15 games, which is the 5th lowest total over that span, and 108.2 points per game overall on the season, which gives their opponents the 6th lowest total on the year. Wrapping up all our stats though now, the Clippers have held the 10th best defensive rating on the season, and they've held their opponents to the 4th least amount of points off turnovers, as well as the 4th lowest second chance points this season as well. They haven't been top 10 in the other 2 defensive categories, but still they've looked very good defensively nonetheless. Now, over their last 15 games, this team has looked very good, and if you had to ask me why, I really think it goes back to one thing I said in my last Clippers video, and that has to be getting great and efficient play from the point guard position, and that's exactly what they've gotten as of late. This is actually what I said in my last video. Another thing I think people need to remember is just how important the efficiency from the point guard spot has needed to be from the Clippers in order for them to succeed. Reggie Jackson, who they acquired during the middle of last season, has started in 10 of the Clippers' last 11 games and 24 games for the Clippers overall this season. One of the biggest things with that is the fact that when Reggie Jackson has had a positive plus-minus rating, which of course indicates that he has played efficiently, the Clippers have won, and when he has had a negative plus-minus rating and played inefficient basketball, the Clippers have lost, and that's happened in every single games where he started, aside from just 2 games where Jackson had a negative plus-minus rating against the Heat on February 15th, yet the Heat still won, and when he had a negative rating during this winning streak in their game against the Hawks on March 22nd, yet the team still got the victory. So if Rondo arrives in LA and can play efficient basketball, and Jackson can continue to play efficiently for the Clippers going forward, they will for sure have the ability to make a deep playoff run, and this current stretch of games for the Clippers feels like it's truly them starting to figure things out and come together. So yes, efficient play from the point guard spot has been huge for the Clippers, like you heard in that clip, and the team's new 6th man, or just current 6th man, Rajon Rondo, has been great since arriving in LA, as the Clippers are 6-0 when Rondo suits up for the team, and it's not surprising that Rondo has been extremely efficient ever since arriving in LA, when I just played you that clip from the last Clippers video. Rondo has had a positive plus-minus in every single game he's played, aside from last night, but he was at just even at the 0 plus-minus rating, so even though it wasn't a positive number, it's still very good that it wasn't a negative and an inefficient night nonetheless. Now, this stat should say 6-0, not 7-0, as Rondo missed the Clippers game against the Rockets, but the team has outscored their opponents by a huge 71-point margin when Rondo is on the floor for them, and that shows just how huge he's been for this Clippers team, in all honesty. Now, let's get away from directly looking at just the numbers and talk in terms of what we can expect from the Clippers in the playoffs, and personally, I think it's a total toss-up, and we don't necessarily know what to expect from them as of right now. Like I said earlier, they haven't had 4 of their starters for a big chunk of games during this team's recent run, where they've won 13 of their last 15 games. That can really be a positive, as it shows that this team's supporting cast and bench will be able to provide a big boost for them when the playoffs begin. But 2 things to remember are when the playoffs begin, teams' rotations typically shrink down to around 7, 8, or 9 players, so a lot of these guys getting big minutes now will for sure have their minutes decreased, as well as the fact that maybe the team's starting unit is really what has been bringing them down, as they just aren't too great together or don't have good chemistry. I'm sure most of you NBA fans, or specifically Clippers fans, I know you'll definitely remember how good this team looked in the 2019 playoffs, getting victories over the potent Golden State Warriors, but then all of a sudden, they seemed that they had lost that fight and that magic from the previous year after they added Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to their roster. The team also does have their fair share of issues, as they have had their issues this season defending in the paint, as well as during this recent stretch, and while they have defended the fast break well as of late, they've struggled a bit in that area overall in the year. So that's another thing that the team is going to need to clean up come playoff time. In terms of their own offensive struggles instead of defense, while they have shot the best free throw percentage this season, they've gotten to the line the 4th least amount of times. Then they've also been mediocre in rebounding, and then they've really struggled in dishing out assists. And those are some huge areas you're going to need to thrive in come playoff time, in my opinion. So this team has been playing very good lately, like I showed throughout the video, but they've also put up very good numbers for the whole season, so it's very hard to say if this team just looks better statistically than they really are, or if it really is this team starting to come alive and they mean business. Now, I don't want it to seem like this is a video where I just bash the Clippers, as I pointed out many of their flaws in the last few minutes, so I want to just end this video on a positive. The Clippers have had the third best record in the entire NBA for the season, and they've also had the fifth hardest strength of schedule. So this team has had tough competition and beaten some very good teams in the process of accumulating the record that they hold for the season. They've also beaten very good teams lately, like mentioned before, and I think that there's something to say about that, but I'll be interested to see if this Clippers team is really starting to click and come together, or all of this is just a masquerade we're seeing from the Clippers, and while their numbers have been looking great, this team truly isn't for real. However, if they can improve on some of the things I mentioned in this video that are their flaws, I do think they can make a playoff series against the Lakers, Suns, or Jazz go to 6 or 7 games. But I'm still not sure if they would be able to win said series against one of those 3 teams. So anyway, guys, I want to know what you guys have thought about the Clippers' level of play lately, level of play overall in the season, or anything having to do with the team down below in the comment section. Like mentioned before though, if you liked the video, then make sure to give it a like as it helps out a lot. And if you're new to the channel and or enjoy the NBA, then hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That way you stay up to date with my newest content. Anyway though guys, I'm SCJ and I am out. Peace.